Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to throw my thoughts into the ring regarding yesterday's PMQs on a day when it was basically all about the Conservatives making more promises that will never transpire. Keir Starmer put in a surprisingly, especially stunning performance as he hauled the Prime Minister over the coals over his lack of basic humanity regarding Yemen. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So I'm going to focus entirely on Starmer's exchanges on this one. Nothing wrong with the questions that Ian Blackford of the SNP asked, but it was along similar lines to the past and it got identical useless responses from Johnson. But Starmer was absolutely on fire here. Now, he's been very effective at exposing Johnson in PMQs since they both faced off against each other last spring, of course. Remember that Starmer is a former top prosecutor, and those skills are absolutely invaluable in cross-examining the Prime Minister. Where his skill set would need to be a bit more, I suppose, is in that if you expose lies in a court, in a criminal case, say, you're winning, because that's the idea. Exposing lies in Parliament only really works if the audience are aware that their lies have been exposed. But here Starmer has also been consistently pretty good. But he's not making much progress in 2021. This isn't suddenly because he's gone off the boil. Partly this is down to the general smoke and mirrors that the government are projecting. They're making us think that we're near the end of the pandemic. This is causing a lot of people to forgive and forget their failures, oblivious to the fact that those failures are continuing. But until the consequences become undeniable, they are currently succeeding in pretending that they're on top of things. Why? Because the media are towing that line, or the bulk of it. Starmer has done well in exposing incompetences even recently, but it is not going to have an effect on the public view. Too much of the public think that, yeah, a lot went wrong last year, but you know, the government have learned and then things are looking up, they're getting on top of it now. We may have to wait until autumn to see otherwise, unless things go spectacularly wrong and we see it before summer. This is why, amongst other reasons, I think Starmer should have been hammering Brexit as well as coronavirus. Okay, if he thinks it's important to not annoy some Lexiteers who frankly don't like him anyway, then he doesn't have to bash the decision to leave the EU as such, but he can absolutely slate the incompetence of its implementation. But he hasn't, at least not yet. But yesterday he had a chance to do what every PMQ should be about. Essentially, this is the forum for the leader of the opposition to get ready for government. To do that, Starmer needs more support than Boris Johnson, or whichever clown replaces him. For much of 2020 he had that. He very quickly got more credibility amongst the public than Johnson, but Johnson has retaken the lead again. All sorts of problems with that, not least the fact that that now makes Boris Johnson more secure. This is the opposite of what wants to happen. And the way you ensure you have more support than your opposite number is twofold. One, you get more support for yourself. Two, you deprive your opposite number of support that they already have. Talking about human rights violations abroad may not actually gather that much support for Starmer, I'm afraid to say, but exposing Johnson's indifference to it, if not outright malice, has cost Johnson some of his support. It's like in sport, isn't it? The idea is you want to fire up your own supporters and silence the opposition's. Starmer's performance and Johnson's responses will have some Conservative MPs fidgeting awkwardly. We know they're essentially heartless, but the general population are not, and so they need to look compassionate. With even President Biden stopping arms sales to Saudi Arabia, we really should have followed suit. Should have been obvious, a no-brainer. Indeed, we were forced to do that a couple of years ago by a court ruling, which may be the court case that Starmer referred to when Johnson tried to defend his policy as being based on a system that's existed for some years. But Starmer was having none of it. He pointed out that the system wasn't robust, and he's right. See, for most of us, if a system is crap, we just have to make the best of it. Boris Johnson is our head of government. If a system is not fit for purpose, he has the power to improve it. Of all people, The Prime Minister of a large majority government should never ever be able to complain about systems. They have sweeping powers to change most systems quite easily. But he wants to put more effort into stopping judges from finding him guilty of law breaking, in other words, changing the systems that are there to call him to account, than he does of stopping human rights violations around the world. So much for global Britain. And I think the stunning performance from Starmer may have been down to a couple of things. So firstly, he was applying his tried and tested skills to a situation that is not in the Conservatives' safe area. You know, as people always describe Starmer as forensic, don't they? And this is contributing to serious human suffering, remember. And it's not even like we're in step with America. Conservatives in this country tend not to be very comfortable when not following in the footsteps of Uncle Sam. This is almost certainly why Starmer opened by asking if he agreed with President Biden that selling arms for use in Yemen should be suspended. He knew that Johnson would have to give an answer that diverged from the president's line. He probably didn't expect Johnson to basically all but say that Yemen was essentially getting what it deserved. Not in so many words, but that seemed to be the implication of what he responded with. But secondly, because Starmer is, above all else, a human rights lawyer. He's not just very knowledgeable and well practiced in exposing abusers, but it's something that will be one of his main passions as well. This is why I thought this topic would come up this week. I wasn't surprised at all. That's why I hadn't done a video on it myself up until then, because I thought Starmer will go for this, because it was obvious. Sure, you should throw in the odd barbed question about the pandemic response every now and then, but Labour are gaining no traction from that right now. The payoff for that will come later, but maybe not even for half a year. They refuse to discuss Brexit for baffling reasons, would love to be a fly on the wall in their strategy meetings to know what that's based on. So the one thing it would be easy to bash the government with, Brexit, they don't want to talk about. So, of course, when something comes up that highlights massive government failure and is also one of Starmer's main areas of interest, it was bound to feature. But I was also pleased as to just how effective it was. That I didn't necessarily expect, because, it's always effective in that you can watch it with a critical mind and see that Starmer is exposing Johnson week after week. But is it something that would really have a wider impact? And it really did. This could easily have been along the line of questions that played to the wider Labour membership in sticking up for the grievously oppressed. Easily could have been that. Someone else could have done that and it wouldn't have bitten as hard. It would have just played to their own support base. That would have served no purpose at all. You need to use these opportunities to either garner support for your side. That means appealing to people who don't currently support you. You gain nothing by appealing to people who do. Or stripping support from the government. The latter was absolutely achieved. There's no defending the government's policy to simultaneously slash foreign aid for a country whose people are suffering and dying on such a scale, whilst also selling weapons to the very people causing that suffering and death. There's no defending it at all. Not whether you're on the left or the right or the centre of politics. It's simply inhuman. And even Johnson knew it. Do you know how he finished? This was for me what let me know that Starmer had hit a chord. Because as he often does, so Johnson complains all the time that Starmer's not standing up and saying what a brilliant job the Prime Minister is doing. He's always going, why aren't you just saying how amazing I am? Why do you keep opposing me? Hello, Leader of the Opposition. Last year he kept trying to bait Starmer to talk about Brexit when he was actually right not to fall into that trap. Yesterday, Johnson finished off by complaining that Starmer hadn't asked any questions about COVID. There's a lot of deliberate distraction when it comes to Boris Johnson at PMQs, but where you see the real him is in his petulance. He can't help it. He didn't like being asked about his policy on Saudi Arabia and Yemen. He wanted to be asked about COVID. That's his safe space for now. And this is exactly why Starmer needed to ask about his foreign policy instead, and why he shouldn't have asked a single question about COVID. He would do well to remember another sporting adage. Always do the opposite of what your opponent wants you to do. Don't ask questions on a subject that the government wants to talk about. Ask questions on a subject that Johnson desperately wants to avoid. Don't even ask questions that you want to talk about. Ask questions that the government desperately wants to avoid. On this occasion, and this is where I'm not sure if this will be more of the pattern going forward, on this occasion they aligned. It just so happened that something that Starmer is completely comfortable talking about is something that Johnson is deeply uncomfortable talking about. So my fear is we'll be back to the pandemic again before it's a hot potato for the government. We'll have to see. I would like to think that they could look at that and see we need to do more of that. But for now, that was an excellent PMQs from Starmer. On a day when the government are announcing their budget and it's all good news, and we know it's not going to be eventually, but the government are making promises. They're promising the earth, just like they would Brexit, it won't be delivered. But for now, the people think it will be. Because the government announcing these plans, well, they've announced the plans, they're going to go follow through with it. No, they're not. But people won't see that for a few years. So you get limited traction bashing the budget. All you can do is what any opposition can do. You can pick at what it doesn't do. Pick at the holes in it. With COVID, again, you can pick at where they're going wrong, but the consequences aren't hitting at the moment, not in most people's eyes. But anyway, it was what it is. It was a good performance, not because the performance itself was good, but because of the effect on the Prime Minister. You could tell at the end he hated that. That's what you need in a PMQs. And of course, the reason why Johnson hated it was because there would be Conservative MPs deeply uncomfortable about those exchanges. More of that, please. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.